Homeless veteran inherits the farmhouse everyone avoided. What do you like to be in life? Homeless veteran inherits the farmhouse everyone avoided. What do you like to be a life? Homeless veteran inherits the farmhouse everyone avoided. What do you like to be a life? Members of the students in the deal ground. Homeless veteran inherits the farmhouse everyone avoided. Everyone nother inhorted. Let's take a look at the life. What do you like to be a life? Homeless veteran inherits the farmhouse everyone avoided. What is they one of quite life? Homeless veteran inherits the farmhouse everyone avoided. Everyone none avoided. What he found inside changed everything. If you've ever felt like you were at the absolute end of your rope, with nowhere left to turn, then this story is for you. Because sometimes the place you're meant to be is the one everyone else has written off. The vibration of the bus was a dull, constant hum that had worked its way into my bones over the last 8 hours. It was a greyhound, one of those lumbering metal beasts that smells of stale air and quiet desperation. Outside the grimy window, the concrete sprawl of the city had finally bled away, replaced by the flat, brown fields of late autumn. Skeletal trees clawed at a sky the color of dishwater. It was a landscape that matched my mood perfectly. Empty. My reflection stared back at me from the glass, a ghost superimposed over the passing scenery. Thinner than I used to be, with eyes that had seen too much and slept too little. The faded army surplus jacket was my only real shield against the November chill. My worldly possessions were crammed into the duffel bag between my feet. A change of clothes, a worn paperback, and a thick legal envelope that felt heavier than everything else combined. It was the reason I was on this bus, rattling toward a town I hadn't seen in 15 years, toward a past I had tried very hard to forget. 2 years. 2 years since I'd gotten the official discharge papers, the formal handshake, the pat on the back that felt more like a shove out the door. 2 years of drifting, of trying to find my footing on ground that constantly shifted beneath me. The VA paperwork was a mountain I couldn't climb. The jobs were temporary fixes that never stuck. And the nights were the worst. Sleeping in shelters, under overpasses, in the back of unlocked trucks. The noise of the city was a constant roar, but it was never loud enough to drown out the echoes in my own head. Then the letter had found me, a minor miracle of bureaucratic persistence. It had been forwarded from my last known base, to a VFW post, to a shelter I'd stayed at 3 months prior. The return address was a law office in Blackwood Creek, the town where I was born, the town where he had lived and died. My grandfather, Arthur Vance. I hadn't seen him since I was 10. My mother had packed our bags in the middle of the night after a fight that rattled the window panes of the old farmhouse. I remembered his face, etched with a kind of granite disappointment as he watched us leave. He never called. We never went back. My mother passed away 5 years later, and I enlisted a week after my 18th birthday, eager to trade one kind of uniform for another. I'd told myself he was a hard man, a cold man, that he hadn't cared. It was an easier story to live with. The bus hissed to a stop, the air brakes sighing like a tired old man. "Blackwood Creek," the driver mumbled into the intercom, the words crackling with static. I was the only one who got off. The bus pulled away, leaving me alone on a cracked sidewalk in front of a gas station with a flickering sign. The air here was different. It was sharp, clean, smelling of damp earth and wood smoke. It smelled like a memory I couldn't quite place. The town hadn't changed much. The same single main street, the same brick storefronts with faded awnings. A few cars were parked at an angle in front of the diner. It was quiet. The kind of deep, hollow quiet that settles over small towns in the middle of a weekday. I checked the address on the envelope again. Abernathy and Sons, attorneys at law. It was 2 blocks down, above the old hardware store. I pulled my jacket tighter and started walking. Every step felt heavy, like I was wading through something thicker than air. People said you can't go home again. For me, I wasn't even sure it had ever been home in the first place. All I knew was that I had nowhere else to go. The letter had promised an inheritance, the final settlement of the estate of Arthur Vance. I wasn't expecting much, maybe enough for a few weeks in a motel, a few hot meals, a temporary reprieve. I had learned to live on temporary reprieves. I had no idea that what waited for me wasn't just a settlement, it was a reckoning. The stairs up to the lawyer's office creaked under my weight, each groan a complaint against the intrusion. The air on the second floor was thick with the smell of old paper and dust. The name on the frosted glass door was faded, the gold leaf peeling at the edges. I pushed it open. A small bell tinkled, a sound that seemed too cheerful for the space. A woman with a tight perm and glasses on a chain looked up from a typewriter that might have been an antique. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone suggesting she doubted it. "I'm here to see Mr. Abernathy," I said, my voice hoarse. "My name is Leo Vance." Her expression flickered, a brief spark of recognition, or maybe just pity. "He's expecting you. Go on in." She nodded toward a heavy oak door at the back of the room. The office was a cavern of dark wood and leather-bound books that looked as if they hadn't been opened in a century. A fine layer of dust coated everything, dancing in the single beam of sunlight slanting through the tall, grimy window. Behind a massive desk sat a man who seemed to be made of the same materials as the room, old, weathered, and sturdy. This had to be the son, because he looked at least 70. He stood up, extending a dry, papery hand. "Mr. Vance, I'm Robert Abernathy. My father handled your grandfather's affairs for 50 years. Now I do." His grip was surprisingly firm. He gestured to a worn leather chair opposite his desk. "Please, sit." I sank into the chair, the duffel bag at my feet. The silence stretched, filled only by the ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. Mr. Abernathy finally steepled his fingers and looked at me over the top of his reading glasses. "Your grandfather passed 3 months ago. I'm sorry for your loss." I just nodded. It felt strange to accept condolences for a man I barely knew, a man I had resented for most of my life. "He was a particular man, your grandfather," Abernathy said, choosing his words carefully. "Didn't have many friends, kept to himself, especially these last few years. But he was meticulous. His will was very clear." He slid a folder across the polished surface of the desk. "He left you everything." Everything. The word hung in the air. I thought of the farmhouse, the land. I remembered it as a boy, a sprawling property with a big red barn and fields that rolled on forever. For a dizzying second, I felt a surge of something like hope. Abernathy must have seen it in my eyes, because his expression tightened with a kind of professional sympathy. "Now, before you get any ideas, you need to understand the situation. The property, the house, the barn, it's all there. But so is the debt." He opened the folder. Inside were papers, columns of numbers, official-looking documents with red stamps. He took out a significant reverse mortgage several years ago. On top of that, the property taxes haven't been paid in 2 years. In total, the estate is in arrears to the tune of about $95,000. The hope I'd felt collapsed like a punctured lung. 95,000. I had $63 in my pocket. So, what does that mean? It means the bank holds the primary lien. They've already initiated foreclosure proceedings. The county is also looking to seize the property for the back taxes. Frankly, Mr. Vance, The estate is insolvent. Insolvent? I repeated the word. It sounded sterile, legal. It meant worthless. Essentially, he confirmed. There is, however, an offer on the table. A development corporation, Northwood Properties, has been trying to buy up land in this area for a new housing tract. They knew of your grandfather's situation. They've made a standing offer to buy the property as is, pay off all the debts, and leave the estate with a small remainder. He pushed another paper toward me. After all debts are cleared, you would walk away with approximately $10,000. $10,000. A month ago, that would have sounded like a king's ransom. It was a ticket out. A security deposit on an apartment, a used car, a fresh start somewhere far away from here. It was a smart move. The only move. Why would they want it? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. If it's in such bad shape, the house is a teardown. Everyone in town knows that. Arthur let it go years ago. They don't want the house, son. They want the land. 30 acres of prime real estate bordering the state forest. It's the cornerstone of their development plan. He leaned back, the old chair groaning in protest. The town, they called it the Vance Spite House. Your grandfather had offers for years. Good ones. He refused every time. Drove people crazy. He just sat out there, on that land, while the world moved on around him. Let it all fall to pieces. Spite. That sounded like the man I remembered. Hard. Unforgiving. So I just signed the paper, and it's done? That's the simple version, yes. You sign the deed over to Northwood. They pay the bank in the county, and my office will cut you a check for the balance. You could be on a bus out of here by tomorrow afternoon with a clean slate. Tomorrow afternoon. The thought was seductive. No more shelters, no more sleeping rough. But something held me back. A flicker of an old memory, maybe. Standing on the porch of that house, my grandfather's hand on my shoulder, pointing out a hawk circling high above the fields. It was one of the few good memories I had, and he had held on to it. He'd held on to it so tightly that he'd let it rot around him rather than let it go. Why? I want to see it first, I said, the words surprising me as much as they seemed to surprise Abernathy. He raised an eyebrow. There's not much to see. The place has been vacant for months. It's not pleasant. I don't care. I need to see it. He studied me for a long moment, his gaze sharp and analytical. Then he gave a slow, deliberate nod. All right. I suppose you're entitled to that. He opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a single, old-fashioned iron key attached to a simple brass tag. The number 7 was stamped into it. He slid it across the desk. It made a scraping sound on the wood. The power's off, of course, and the water, and I'd be careful on the porch steps. The third one is rotted through. He gave me directions. It was about 2 miles out of town, at the end of a long, unpaved road. Too far to walk before sundown. Is there a cab service? I asked. Abernathy gave a short, dry laugh. This is Blackwood Creek, Mr. Vance. We have a sheriff and a volunteer fire department. That's about it. You'll have to walk. So that was it. I stood up, the old key feeling cold and heavy in my palm. My inheritance. A key to a derelict house, a mountain of debt, and an offer to trade it all for a bus ticket to nowhere. Thank you, Mr. Abernathy, I said. Don't thank me yet, he replied, his voice flat. Go see the place. Sleep on it. Come back tomorrow and sign the papers. It's the sensible thing to do. I walked out of his office, the little bell tinkling behind me, and stood for a moment on the landing. Sensible. He was right. Selling was the only logical choice. I was a homeless veteran with $63 to my name. $10,000 was a lifeline I'd be a fool to refuse. But I couldn't shake the question. Why would a man hold on to a piece of land with such ferocious, self-destructive spite? There had to be more to the story. And the only place I was going to find the answer was at the end of that 2-mile walk. I spent the last of my cash at the town diner on a hot meal, a cheeseburger and fries that tasted like the best thing I'd ever eaten. The waitress, a woman with kind eyes and a tired smile, kept my coffee cup full. I sat in the booth, nursing the warmth of the mug, watching the afternoon light fade outside the window. I felt like a ghost, an observer in a life that wasn't mine. I was Leo Vance, grandson of Arthur Vance, the town eccentric, the heir to a pile of rotten wood and bad debt. When I couldn't delay any longer, I shouldered my duffel bag and headed out of town, following the road Abernathy had described. The walk was cold. The wind cut through my jacket, and the gray sky threatened snow. The paved road soon gave way to gravel, and the houses grew farther and farther apart until there was nothing but empty fields and dark woods on either side. It felt like I was walking off the edge of the map. Finally, I saw it. A rusted mailbox, leaning sideways, the name Vance barely visible beneath a coat of rust and grime. Behind it, a dirt driveway, more of a tunnel really, carved through a thicket of overgrown sumac and tangled briars. The branches scraped at my jacket as I pushed my way through. It was at least a quarter of a mile long, this driveway, and with every step, the silence deepened. The sound of the road faded, replaced by the rustle of dead leaves under my boots and the sigh of the wind in the pines. Then the trees opened up, and I saw it. The house. Abernathy's description hadn't done it justice. Derelict was too kind a word. It was a skeleton, a two-story farmhouse that must have been handsome once, but was now surrendering to the slow, relentless pull of nature. Gray paint peeled off the clapboard siding in long, curling strips, revealing the weathered wood beneath. The roof sagged in the middle, looking like a broken back. Windows were boarded up, or stared out like vacant eyes with shattered panes. And the porch was a death trap. Half of it had collapsed, and the remaining section tilted at a dangerous angle. I remembered Abernathy's warning about the third step. The big red barn I remembered from my childhood was still standing, but just barely. Its doors hung open on broken hinges, and a large section of its roof had caved in, leaving a gaping hole to the sky. The whole place was surrounded by a sea of weeds, waist-high and brittle, their dead stalks rattling in the wind. It didn't look like a home. It looked like a grave. I stood there for a long time, at the edge of the overgrown yard, the cold seeping into me. This was my legacy, a monument to failure, to spite. The developer's offer felt less like a choice and more like a mercy killing. Put this place, and the memory of the man who let it happen, out of its misery. Sign the papers, take the money, run. But I had walked 2 miles to get here. I had to go inside. I had to see the rest of it. I picked my way carefully across the yard, the weeds grabbing at my ankles. I stepped onto the porch, testing each board with my full weight before proceeding. The third step was indeed a hole of splintered wood. I bypassed it and reached the front door. The wood was swollen and cracked, the paint blistered. The iron key felt alien in my hand, a relic from another time. I pushed it into the lock. It resisted, grinding with rust and disuse. For a moment, I didn't think it would turn. I put my shoulder into it, twisting with all my strength. There was a loud, painful-sounding crack, and the lock gave way. The door swung inward with a low groan, opening into darkness. A wave of cold, stale air washed over me, carrying the scent of dust, damp, and something else. Something like decay, but also like time itself. The smell of a place that had been sealed up, holding its breath for years. I stepped across the threshold, my boots echoing on the bare wooden floor. I left the door open behind me, letting a rectangle of pale, gray light spill into the entryway. It wasn't much, but it was enough to see. The inside was even worse than the outside. Dust lay over everything like a fine gray snow. Cobwebs, thick as cotton, hung from the ceiling and draped over the furniture. To my left was what must have been the living room. A sofa and 2 armchairs, their floral patterns faded and stained, were huddled in the center of the room, covered in a white sheet that had turned yellow with age. A stone fireplace stood cold and black against the far wall, a few charred logs still sitting on the grate. To my right, a staircase led up into the gloom of the second floor. Each step was layered with a thick carpet of dust, undisturbed. No one had been up there in a very long time. I moved deeper into the house, my footsteps the only sound. The dining room was dominated by a heavy oak table, its surface invisible under the dust. 6 chairs were tucked neatly around it, as if waiting for a family that would never arrive. On the wall, a dark rectangle showed where a picture had once hung. The kitchen was at the back of the house. It was a disaster. Cabinet doors hung open, and the linoleum floor was peeling up in cracked, yellowed sheets. A thick layer of grime covered the countertops. On the small kitchen table, a single coffee mug sat next to a newspaper, dated almost a year ago. It was like a scene frozen in time, an ordinary morning abruptly abandoned. I felt a profound sense of sadness settle over me. This wasn't just neglect, it was a surrender. My grandfather hadn't just let the house go. He had given up on living inside it. He had just existed here, waiting for the end. The anger I'd held onto for so long began to curdle into a strange, hollow pity. I wandered back into the living room, the gray light from the open door beginning to fail as the afternoon wore on. I ran a hand over the dusty sheet covering the sofa. What had happened here? What had turned a man who was once, I remembered, so proud and strong, into this? My eyes scanned the room, looking for, I didn't know what. A clue. An answer. Something to explain the waste of it all. Most of the room was Spartan, almost empty. But in the corner, tucked away by the fireplace, was a small, roll-top desk. Unlike the other furniture, it wasn't covered. It was made of dark, heavy wood, and it was locked. I walked over to it, my boots stirring up little clouds of dust. I tried the roll-top. It was jammed shut. I pulled on the drawers. Locked. All of them. It was the only thing in the entire house that seemed secured, protected. A fortress in a field of ruins. Curiosity, sharp and insistent, pierced through my despair. What was inside? I looked around the room. In the fireplace, next to the old logs, was a heavy iron poker. It was perfect. I wedged the tip of the poker into the seam of the roll-top and leaned on it with all my weight. The old wood groaned, splintered, and then, with a loud crack, it gave way. The lock had broken. With my heart pounding, I slowly, carefully, rolled back the top. The interior of the desk was a maze of small compartments and drawers, and it was packed. Not with junk, but with papers. Stacks of them, tied with string. Ledgers, bank statements. And in the very center, placed deliberately as if it were the most important thing of all, was a stack of envelopes. About a dozen of them, made of thick, creamy paper, bound together with a faded blue ribbon. My name was written on the top envelope in a spidery but surprisingly steady hand. Leo. I sank into the dusty desk chair, my legs suddenly weak. My hands were trembling as I untied the ribbon. The first envelope was sealed. I tore it open. Inside were several folded sheets of paper, filled with the same handwriting. I held it up to the fading light from the doorway and began to read. Leo, if you are reading this, then I am gone. And you have come back. I have prayed for that, in my own way, for 15 years. I know you must have questions. I know you must hate me. I wouldn't blame you. I let you go. I let your mother take you, and I never fought to get you back. I want you to know why. You don't remember the accident. You were too young. Just 4 years old. A fall from the hayloft in the barn. It was my fault. I was supposed to be watching you. 1 minute you were there, the next you were on the ground. The doctors in town did what they could, but it was bad. A head injury. They said you might not. They said there could be permanent damage. The hospital bills started coming. They were more money than I had ever seen in my life. I sold the cattle first, then the big tractor. Then I started selling off parcels of the land on the far side of the creek. Your mother, she couldn't take it. The worry, the guilt. She blamed me. And she was right to. The fights got worse. She wanted to take you to the city, to see specialists, to give you a better life than the one I could provide. I was a farmer, with no farm left, just a mountain of debt. A proud, stubborn fool. The night she left, she told me she was taking you somewhere I couldn't ruin you. And I knew she was right. So I let her go. I made her promise not to tell you the real reason. I told her to tell you I was a hard man, a cold man who didn't care. It was better for you to hate me than for you to grow up in the shadow of my failure, of my debt. I spent the next 10 years paying it off. Every last penny of those medical bills. That's why the house fell apart. That's why the barn is caving in. Every dollar I made went to the bank. I couldn't bear the thought of you being saddled with that. It was my mistake, my debt to pay, not yours. I had to stop reading. The paper was shaking in my hands. I couldn't breathe. I looked around the decaying room, at the peeling paint and the thick dust, and I saw it all differently. This wasn't a monument to spite. It was a monument to sacrifice. He hadn't let the house go. He had offered it up, piece by piece, to pay for a mistake that had nearly cost me my life. An accident I didn't even remember. The cold I'd been feeling all day wasn't just from the November air. It was a coldness I'd carried inside me for 15 years. The simple, ugly story I'd told myself, that my grandfather was a cruel man who had thrown us away, had been a shield. And he had just shattered it. I cried. I sat there in the dusty, failing light of my grandfather's ruined house, and I cried for the boy who had lost his family, for the mother who had run from a pain she couldn't face, and for the old man who had spent the rest of his life alone, paying for a single moment of carelessness. I cried until my throat was raw and my eyes burned. The truth wasn't a relief. It was an agony. It was a weight far heavier than the story I had been carrying. When the tears finally stopped, the room was almost completely dark. The only light was a pale, ghostly luminescence from the overcast sky. I was shivering, but I didn't move. I just sat there, in the silence, feeling the immensity of what I had just learned. My whole life, the foundation of who I thought I was, had been built on a lie my grandfather had constructed to protect me. I picked up the next letter. My hands were steadier now. Leo, there's more you need to know. After the debts were paid, I was old. Too old to start over. Too tired to fix what was broken. I just wanted to live out my days here, on the land. But then the developers came sniffing around. A company called Northwood. They saw the fields, the trees, the proximity to the state forest. They saw dollar signs. They made me an offer. A generous one. Enough to fix this place up, live comfortably. I told them to get lost. They didn't like that. They came back with lawyers. They found out about the back taxes. They started putting pressure on the county. They thought they could squeeze the old man out. What they didn't understand is that this land is more than just dirt and trees. It's your birthright. It's the only thing I have left to give you. I knew I wasn't going to be around forever, and I knew they'd come after you the second I was gone. They'd offer you a quick payday, and you, not knowing the truth, would take it. Why wouldn't you? So I had to make a plan. It wasn't a good plan. It was a desperate one, but it was all I had. He went on to explain. He had taken out the reverse mortgage, pulling every last dime of equity out of the property. He didn't spend it. He knew the bank would come for the house when he was gone, and that Northwood would be waiting to snap it up. It was a gamble, a scorched earth defense. He was making the property as unattractive, as legally complicated as possible. He was trying to buy time. But for what? The letter ended abruptly. Look under the floorboards in my bedroom, the loose one by the window. Be careful. They will try to take this from you. Don't let them. This home saved you once. It can save you again. My whole body was buzzing, a strange mix of grief, rage, and a terrifying, unfamiliar flicker of purpose. I needed a light. My duffel bag was still by the front door. I fumbled through it, my fingers finding the small, cheap flashlight I always carried. I clicked it on. The beam cut a sharp, white circle through the oppressive darkness. I made my way to the staircase. The flashlight beam danced ahead of me, illuminating the thick, untouched dust on the stairs. I took them one at a time, the wood groaning under my feet. The second floor was even colder than the first. A long hallway with 4 doors leading off it. I pushed open the first one. A bathroom, the mirror cracked, the porcelain stained. The second was a guest room, empty except for a metal bed frame. The third was my old room. A small wooden bed, a child-sized desk. A faded poster of a baseball player was still tacked to the wall. A lump formed in my throat. I backed out and closed the door gently. The last door at the end of the hall had to be his. It was. A simple iron bed, neatly made, a single wooden chair, a tall wardrobe, and a window that looked out over the dark rolling fields. I swept the flashlight beam across the floor. The floorboards were wide, old-growth pine, dark with age. I walked over to the window and knelt down. I ran my hand over the boards, feeling for a loose edge. There. One of them had a slight give to it. I used the tip of the poker again, wedging it into the crack and prying upwards. The board came up with a screech of old nails. I shone the light into the dark space beneath. It was a cavity about 2 feet deep, and it was filled with metal ammunition boxes, the old green kind with latches on the side. There were at least 10 of them. My heart hammered against my ribs. I reached in and pulled one out. It was heavy. I set it on the floor and worked the stiff latch. It popped open. I pointed the flashlight inside. It was full of cash. Stacks of it, bundled in paper bands. Hundreds, 50s, 20s. I opened another box. Same thing. And another. All of them were filled with money. At the bottom of the last box, underneath the final stack of bills, was another letter and a thick, leather-bound ledger. I sat back on my heels, stunned into silence. I had no idea how much was there. It had to be the money from the reverse mortgage. All of it. He had hidden it. He'd created a paper trail of insolvency, a legal fiction of a worthless estate, while secretly stashing the actual value of the property right here, under the floor. I picked up the final letter. Leo, by now you've found it. This is the seed. It's not a fortune, but it's enough. It's enough to pay the back taxes. It's enough to pay the lawyers. It's enough to tell Northwood Properties and the bank to go to hell. It's enough to start over. To fix the roof and the porch and the well. Enough to make this place a home again. The ledger will show you everything. Every penny I took out, every dollar I spent on necessities. The rest is here. I lived like a pauper these last few years so that you could have a choice. You can take this money and run. I wouldn't blame you. Go build a life for yourself somewhere new. You've earned it. God knows you've earned it. Or you can stay. You can fight for this land. It's in your blood, this place. It's stubborn and it's broken, but it's strong. Just like our family. The choice is yours. Whatever you decide, know this. I was proud of you. I followed your career in the service. I kept every newspaper clipping that mentioned your unit. I am sorry I didn't have the courage to tell you myself. I was a coward. but I have always loved you. Your grandfather, Arthur. I let the letter fall to my lap. The beam from the flashlight wavered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The choice: take the money and run, or stay and fight. 10,000 from the developers versus this. A chance. A hard, brutal, overwhelming chance to rebuild not just a house, but a life. A legacy. I thought about the last 2 years. The shelters, the cold nights, the constant feeling of being invisible, of being erased. I thought about Mr. Abernathy's sensible advice. Sign the papers. Take the easy way out. And I thought about my grandfather, a man I had misunderstood my entire life. A man who had endured poverty, loneliness, and the scorn of his neighbors, all to protect this place for me. He had spent his life paying one debt, only to take on another, all for my sake. How could I walk away from that? How could I let some faceless corporation pave over this monument to his love? I couldn't. In that moment, in the cold, dark room of that broken house, something inside me shifted. The exhaustion I had been carrying for years felt like it was finally beginning to lift, replaced by a slow, burning anger. A resolve. This wasn't just a property anymore. It was a battlefield. And my grandfather had just given me the ammunition to fight. I spent the night in the house. I didn't sleep in a bed. I sat in the old desk chair downstairs, the letters and the ledger spread out before me, the flashlight casting a pool of light on the table. I read through the ledger. He had documented everything. The slow decay of the farm, the rising costs, the predatory offers from Northwood. It was a diary of a quiet, desperate war. By the time the first hint of dawn began to gray the windows, I knew what I had to do. I packed one of the ammo boxes full of cash into my duffel bag. It felt impossibly heavy. I closed up the house, locking the front door behind me. The walk back to town felt different. The air was still cold, but it didn't bite as deep. The world seemed sharper, more real. I wasn't a ghost anymore. I had a purpose. I was waiting outside Abernathy's office when he arrived at 8 o'clock sharp. He looked surprised to see me, a flicker of concern on his face. "Mr. Vance, you look like you've had a rough night." "I've had a rough couple of years," I said. "Can we talk?" In his office, I didn't sit down. I walked over to his desk and unzipped the duffel bag. I lifted the heavy metal box and placed it on his desk with a solid thud. He stared at it, then at me. "What's this?" he asked, his voice cautious. "It's a down payment," I said. I opened the latch. He peered inside, and his eyes went wide. For the first time since I'd met him, Robert Abernathy was speechless. "My grandfather was a complicated man," I said, my voice steady and clear. "But he wasn't a fool, and he didn't die broke." I pushed the letters and the ledger across the desk. "Read these. This is the real story." I told him everything. About the accident, the medical bills, the sacrifice, about the reverse mortgage and Northwood's harassment. As he read, his expression changed from disbelief to shock, and then to a slow, simmering anger of his own. He'd known Arthur for years, but only the version the town saw, the stubborn, spiteful old hermit. When he was done, he looked up at me, his eyes gleaming with a new respect. "Good Lord," he breathed. He pulled it off. The old son of a gun actually pulled it off. "The offer from Northwood," I said. "I'm rejecting it. I want to pay the back taxes immediately. I want to settle the lien with the bank. I want you to tell Northwood Properties that the Vance farm is not for sale. Not now, not ever." A slow smile spread across Abernathy's face. "Mr. Vance," he said, and this time there was no pity in his voice, only admiration. "It would be my absolute pleasure." The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Abernathy was a shark. He handled the county tax office, presenting them with a certified check that left the clerk speechless. He then went to the bank, negotiating a full settlement of the reverse mortgage, paying it off in a single lump sum. The foreclosure proceedings were halted immediately. The estate was declared solvent. His final call was to the lawyer for Northwood Properties. I was in his office when he made it. He put it on speakerphone. "Robert?" The slick voice on the other end said. "I trust you have the signed papers from the heir." "I do have some papers here, Bill," Abernathy said, his voice dripping with false pleasantry. "Let's see. A receipt from the county tax assessor, paid in full, a notice of lien satisfaction from the bank, and a formal rejection of your client's predatory and frankly insulting offer." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. "What? That's impossible. The estate is worthless." "The estate is very much not worthless," Abernathy purred, "and the Vance property is officially off the market. If your client or any of its representatives sets foot on that land again, my client will consider it trespassing and will prosecute to the fullest extent of the law. Have a nice day." He hung up the phone with a decisive click. He looked at me and grinned. "Well," he said, "that's that. The farm is yours, free and clear. Now the hard part begins." He was right. Owning the farm was one thing. Living there was another. I moved my few belongings out of the shelter I'd found in a nearby town and into the house. The first week, I slept on the floor in my old army sleeping bag. My first priorities were practical. I used some of the money to hire a local crew to put a new roof on the house and the barn. I had a well specialist come out and get the water running again. I paid an electrician to rewire the whole house, bringing it up to code. Every day, I worked from sunup to sundown. I tore out the rotten porch and, with the help of a carpenter from town, built a new one. I scrubbed the floors, washed the windows, and aired out the rooms until the smell of dust and decay was replaced by the scent of sawdust and fresh paint. It was brutal, back-breaking work. But with every nail I hammered and every board I replaced, I felt like I was rebuilding a piece of myself. The ghosts were still there. The memory of my grandfather's sacrifice was a constant, aching presence. But it wasn't a haunt anymore. It was a motivation. I was honoring him. I was finishing the work he had started. Slowly, the town started to notice. People who used to cross the street to avoid the Vance Spite House would slow their cars as they drove by, looking at the new roof, the clear yard, the light in the windows at night. The owner of the hardware store, a gruff man named Sal, started giving me discounts on supplies. The waitress from the diner would pack me an extra slice of pie with my takeout order. They didn't ask questions, not directly, but I could see it in their eyes. They were starting to understand that the story they had told themselves about Arthur Vance might not have been the whole truth. One afternoon, Mr. Abernathy drove out to the farm. I was on the new porch, sanding the railing. He got out of his car and just stood there for a minute, taking it all in. "It looks good, Leo," he said. "It looks like a home again." "It's getting there," I said. "Still a long way to go. Your grandfather would be proud." We sat on the porch steps, drinking coffee I'd made on my new stove. We didn't talk much. We just watched the sun set over the fields, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. For the first time in my adult life, I felt a sense of peace. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't hiding. I was building. The money my grandfather left was a tool, a means to an end. It was enough to fix the house and give me a cushion to live on while I figured out my next steps. I started small. I cleared one of the fields and planted a large vegetable garden. I bought a few chickens. I found an old, broken-down tractor in the back of the barn and spent a month taking it apart and putting it back together until, one day, it sputtered to life with a cloud of black smoke. I wasn't just fixing a farm. I was learning to live again. The quiet no longer felt empty. It felt peaceful. The work didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a purpose. The echoes in my head, the ones from my time in the service, began to fade, replaced by the sound of the wind in the trees and the crow of a rooster at dawn. I found other things in the house as I cleaned it out. In the attic, a trunk filled with my mother's childhood drawings. In the barn, my grandfather's old woodworking tools, still sharp and well-oiled. And in a shoebox at the back of his closet, I found the newspaper clippings he'd mentioned. Dozens of them. Small articles from local papers near the bases I'd been stationed at. A charity drive my unit had organized. A mention in a list of promotions. He had saved every single one. He had been watching over me, from a distance, the whole time. This story, my story, isn't about inheriting a house or finding a pile of money. It's about inheriting a legacy. It's about discovering that the stories we tell ourselves about our past are often incomplete, and that the truth, however painful, can set us free. My grandfather gave me more than a farm. He gave me a second chance. He gave me a place to heal, a place to put down roots, a home. And that's a lesson I wanted to share with all of you. If you've made it this far, thanks. Stories about hitting rock bottom and finding a way back up. It's for anyone who has ever felt lost or broken or misunderstood. So if this resonated with you, if you've ever had to fight for your own second chance, I want you to do too and become part of this community. We're building a place here for people who get it. Second, of your story. Tell me about an inheritance you received that wasn't about money, a piece of wisdom, a second chance, a legacy of love or sacrifice that changed your life.